Good evening, or hello, or good morning, depending on which part of the world you are. My name is Nyikadzino Mashizha, also known as Comrade Chair. I would like to start the initial series of the book reviews that I'll be doing. Today I want to do a very popular African text by a very popular African author known as Chinua Achebe. And our text today is going to be Things Fall Apart. It's going to be quite an interesting journey because this is one of his most popular and famous texts that he penned. He goes by the full name of Albert Chinolomogo Achebe, and his pen name was Chinua Achebe. He was born on the 16th of November 1930 in a place called Ogidi in Nigeria. And it's unfortunately that he has passed on, and he passed on the 21st of March in 2013. Chinua Achebe was raised by his parents in the Igbo town of Ogidi in southeastern Nigeria. Although his parents were Protestant and practiced the Christian faith, Chinua Achebe and his siblings were exposed to the traditional Igbo culture, which included a heavy emphasis on storytelling. Achebe excelled in school and began writing stories as a university student. After graduation, he worked first as an English teacher in the town of Oba. Later, he worked for the Nigerian Broadcasting Services, NBS, in the metropolis of Lagos. He published and gained worldwide attention for Things Fall Apart in 1958. Over the next several decades, Achebe was involved in a mix of academia and Nigerian politics, publishing a number of short stories, children's books, and an essay, a collection of essays. And splitting his time between Nigeria and the United States until 1990, when he returned to the United States of America after a car accident which left him partially disabled. Achebe continued to publish and held a faculty position at Brown University from 2009 until his death in 2013. So I would like to look at the key facts that surround the text Things Fall Apart. The genre of the text, it is a novel and it is a tragedy. Its setting is anchored in pre-colonial Nigeria of the 1890s. The climax of the book is when Okonkwo, the main protagonist of the text, the climax of is on when Okonkwo made us a court messenger. The antagonist of the text are missionaries and the white government officials, especially Reverend Smith and the district commission. Chinua Achebe uses the third person omniscient. This text is historical and was written in 1957 and written in Nigeria, published in 1958. The literal period is post-colonialism. While Achebe was working on Things Fall Apart, he had a few models of African fiction written in English. Two notable exceptions were Amos Tutola's Palm Wine Drinkard and Cyprian Equesis, People of the City. However, though Achebe appreciated the work of these fellow Nigerian writers, he worked to develop a style of his own, such that in 1962 Achebe also had the opportunity to attend a conference with several contemporary African writers in English, including Ghanaian poet Kofi Awono, Nigerian playwright Wolso Yinke, and the US revolutionary poet Langston Hughes. And what was really interesting was that at this conference, Achebe was asked to read a student's manuscript. He was presented with a manuscript, and he was very impressed with that work, such that he forwarded that literary work to an agent, and that student was none other than Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who is now a widely recognized Kenyan writer, especially after the book called A Grain of Wheat, Devil on the Cross, The Trial of Didman Kamati, Wizard of the Crow, to mention just a few. But the text that Chinua Achebe was given to read at that particular time was Weep Not Child. Things Fall Apart is set in 1890 during the early days of colonization and colonization in Nigeria. Achebe depicts the Igbo society in transition from its first contact with the British colonialists to the growing dominance of British rule over the indigenous people. Literary works about or during this time often painted stereotypical portraits of native Africans as primitive. Even works that were critical of the European colonizers, such as Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, depicted Africans as savages who were both oppressed by and excited the savagery of white Christian Europeans. Achebe's novel is a response to these colonialist works of literature. Things Fall Apart is a post-colonial novel that strives to revise previous stereotypes by portraying both cultures with a neutral eye, focusing on the complexity of the Igbo traditions. Right, on the issue of Joseph Conrad, Chinua delivered a lecture and critique of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and where he actually called Conrad a racist, which was provoking controversy among critics and readers. However, Achebe's criticism of Conrad has become a mainstream perspective on Conrad's work, and was even included in the 1988 Norton Critical Edition of Heart of Darkness. Achebe is a man of many quotes. Achebe also delved in the realm of politics. Achebe expressed his political views often in writing, but he was also involved actively in the Nigerian politics when he became the People's Redemption Party Deputy National Vice President in the early 1980s. However, he soon resigned himself in frustration with the level of corruption he witnessed during the elections at the time. Right, as we go into the book, it talks of a man who goes by the name of Okonkwo. Okonkwo appears initially on the stage as a young man, and a great wrestler. One of the best wrestlers in his clan. Okonkwo values strength and aggression, traits he believes are masculine, and his worst fear is to be thought of as feminine or weak, like his father Unoka. Okonkwo's wealth and status within the tribe grow, and he becomes one of the greatest men in the land. With 3 wives and a large stock of yams, he treats his family with a heavy hand, believing that the only emotion worth showing is anger. Okonkwo is particularly worried about his eldest son, Unoka. Okonkwo, sorry. Okonkwo is particularly worried about his eldest son, Noye, in whom he sees signs of laziness reminiscent to that of his father Unoka. One day the clan settles an argument with a neighboring village by demanding the sacrifice of a virgin and a 15-year-old boy named Ikemefuna, who lives with Okonkwo's family for the next 3 years. While living with Okonkwo's family, Ikemefuna becomes very close to Noye, sharing folk tales and encouraging him to enjoy masculine tasks. Okonkwo approves of his influence on Noye and grows fond of Ikemefuna himself. Ikemefuna soon starts to call Okonkwo father. After 3 years, when the oldest man of the tribe, Ezeudu, informs Okonkwo that Ikemefuna must be killed, he advises him not to participate in that killing, since the boy, he says, the boy calls you father. Okonkwo ignores this advice, fearing that others will find him weak or effeminate, and he proceeds to strike the killing blow that takes Ikemefuna out in the forest, where they walk him and they strike him. As we move on through the book, Ezeudu passes away and his funeral celebration draws the entire clan. During the burial, Okonkwo's gun explodes, killing Ezeudu's 16-year-old son. Having killed a fellow clansman, Okonkwo has no choice but to flee the clan with his family. Because the crime is deemed to be female or an accidental crime, he may return back to the village after 7 years. During the time in exile, Okonkwo and his family work hard to start a new farm in Okonkwo's motherland, which was called Mbanta. His mother's kinsmen treat him kindly, but Okonkwo is extremely discouraged by the circumstances. He plans for the day he can return to his rightful place in Umuofia. And I think right there at the start, there is one strong chant, one strong slogan, where they say, Umuofia kwenu. And the people respond, yeah. While working in Mbanta, the white men began to appear among neighboring clans, causing stories to spread about their power and their destruction. When they finally arrive in Mbanta, though the clan is fascinated with this arrival of the Europeans, the locals find the religion a bit absurd or ridiculous. However, Noah is captivated by the hymn he hears first on the day that he comes into contact with the Europeans, and this causes him to join the Christians to get away from his father, who is outraged. When Okonkwo finally returns to Umuofia, the white men have changed his clan as well. Mr. Brown, a white missionary who is popular for his patience and understanding approach, has built a school and a hospital, and many clan members are enrolling their children in the school so that they can one day become clerks or teachers. However, soon after Okonkwo's return, Mr. Brown leaves the country due to health reasons, and Reverend Smith replaces him. Reverend Smith is very uncompromising, encouraging acts among the converted clan members that provoke the rest of the clan. When Enoch, a fanatical convert, rips the mask off one of the masked Egugu during the ceremony, the clan retaliates by burning down the church. Reverend Smith reports this transgression, and the district commissioner tricks the clan's leaders into a meeting with him before apprehending them and handcuffing them. The clan leaders, including Okonkwo, suffer insults and beatings before they are released. And wait in lieu for the village to pay the fine. The morning after they are released, the clan leaders speak of war. Before it was a meeting, and before they could actually go on with the processes of that meeting, they were interrupted by the arrival of court messengers. Full of hate, Okonkwo confronts the leader, who says that the white man commands the meeting to stop. In a flash, Okonkwo strikes down the messenger with his mashizha. Then, on realization that none of his clansmen supported him in that violent action, Okonkwo walks away and hangs himself. When the district commissioner comes to fetch Okonkwo the next day, the clansmen lead him to his hanging body instead, saying that they will not touch it since it was an abomination for a man to take his own life. The district commissioner finds this custom interesting, intriguing, making note of it for his book on Nigeria, which he planned to title the pacification of the primitive tribes of the lower Niger. So that is, in a nutshell, that is what Things Fall Apart is about. So I would like to talk about also some of the main characters in the text. I will not go through all of them. I'll just sample a few. I'll start off with Okonkwo. Okonkwo is the novel's main character and is a very influential clan leader. Okonkwo fears becoming an unsuccessful weak man like his father, Onoka. As a result, Okonkwo is driven by hard work. He's hardworking and aggressive. These traits bring him fame and wealth at the beginning of which is expressed in the beginning of the novel. This same fear also causes Okonkwo to be impatient and brash, however, leading to his eventual downfall when he cannot adjust to the changes occurring in the clan. The next character is Unoka. Unoka is Okonkwo's father. Though he is a talented musician, and most of his best moments were during the harvest months, where he would play his flute on an end. He is also a lazy and irresponsible person, accumulating many debts. Onoka actually, unfortunately, dies a shameful death, still in debt and without a title. His death haunts Okonkwo, who vows to hate everything that his father loved, including gentleness and idleness. The next character that we'll look at is Noye. Noye is Okonkwo's eldest son. Noye resembles his grandfather Onoka in that he is drawn to gentleness and music, even though he recognizes that his father disapproves his actions. Thus, there is tension between Okonkwo and Noye, which leads eventually to the split when Noye becomes one of the clan members who leave to join the Christians. Another character to note is Ikemefuna. Ikemefuna is the ill-fated boy from Mbaino. He was we can say sacrificial lamb to Umuofia in order to prevent a war between the two tribes or the two clans or the two villages. Ikemefuna is unaware that his father had a hand in the killing of one of the daughters of Umuofia, and he doesn't understand why he is taken away from his mother and sister. However, he settles into Okonkwo's household for 3 years and comes to consider Okonkwo as his true father. Noye looks up to Ikemefuna, and the two become inseparable. And Ikemefuna also was a very diligent boy who could actually set these very clever traps to catch birds. At the end of the 3 years, the clan decides that the boy must be killed, and Okonkwo deals the killing blow. So those are the characters that I would like to talk about. There are themes that it looks like a very small book, but it is very rich in terms of its themes. And the themes are very strong. The first one is tradition versus change, or the old and the new, the old Africa and the new Africa. The title quote, let me read it. The title quote, I can just spare a few minutes just to read it for you. It goes like this. Turning and turning in the widening grey, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. May anarchy is loosened upon the world. It is a quote from W.B. Yeats in The Second Coming. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. May anarchy is loosened upon the world. Much of the novel centers on Umuofia traditions of marriage, burial, and harvest. Achebe's decision to use a third-person narrator instead of writing the book from the location of Okonkwo or from Okonkwo's perspective demonstrates just how central the idea of tradition is to the book. Since the third-person narrator can more objectively describe facets of Umuofia society, their love for proverbs, of how they make judicial decisions. For example, to the reader than Okonkwo could as an insider to these rituals. As the quote in the epigraph suggests, Though these traditions that form the center of Umuofia society cannot survive in the face of major changes occurring around them. As the white man enters the clans and impose their world order upon them, Umuofia society spirals apart. So the center cannot hold. May anarchy is loosened upon the world. Okonkwo and his son also symbolize tradition and change, respectively. Okonkwo's character represents tradition, since he holds conventional ideas of rank, reputation, masculinity in high esteem. As the book progresses, however, Okonkwo begins to fall out of favor with the clans. And this descent signals the crumbling of traditional Umuofia society. His adherence to tradition also drives him to kill his own surrogate son, Ikemefun, driving away Noe in the process. Noe feels cold when he contemplates certain aspects of Umuofia society, such as leaving an infant twins out to die, and the idea of a sacrificing innocence like Ikemefun. This pushes him to join the Christians when he was given the chance later on in the novel, as the novel progresses. Another theme is fate versus free will. From the start, Okonkwo seems to drive his ascent in Umuofia society. He rises from being the son of a debtor to being one of the leaders of the clan. Thanks to his hard work and aggression, he becomes known for his wrestling prowess, and we are told that this cannot be attributed to luck. At the most, one could say that that his chi, or personal god, was good. So when they usually say, when a man says yes, then your personal god will say yes very strongly. So Okonkwo said yes very strongly, and his chi, which is personal god, agreed as well. However, once things start turning sour for Okonkwo, he begins to blame his fate. This begins with Ikemefun's death. Ikemefun, along with the infant twins of the novel, represent the most straightforward victims that aren't given a chance to act, but instead are acted upon violently. The ill-fated lad was called Ikemefun. Okonkwo blames the oracle for his part in murdering Ikemefun, though it could be argued, and is argued by the clan's oldest member, is word to end by Okonkwo's neighbor Obriika, that he had a choice in whether to take part or not. Later, when Okonkwo's gun splinters and he accidentally kills one of Ezwodo's sons, Okonkwo faces exile. Although his crops do well in the neighboring clan, he is allowed to return after 7 years, after that 7-year ban, or that 7-year banishment. Okonkwo is completely discouraged by the experience, and we find a reversal of the earlier quote. A man could rise beyond the destiny of his chi. The saying of the elders was not true, but if a man said yes, his chi also affirmed. Here was a man whose chi said nay, despite his own affirmation. Another theme that we can look at, that we can find in Things Fall Apart, is language. Language is a very vital part of the Umuofia society. Strong orators like Ogbuefi Ezeogo are celebrated and given honorable burials because clan meetings are also so important for organization and decision making. These speakers play an important role for society. Storytelling is also a form of education for the clan. Whether they are masculine war stories or feminine fables, storytelling defines different roles for clan members and moves them to action. Even Western religion takes hold because of story and song. When Noah first hears a hymn, it marks the beginning of his transition from clan member to become a Christian. The White District Commissioner also notes the importance of language to the Umuofia, but in a less generous light. When speaking with Obriakam, he thinks one of the most infuriating habits of these people was their love of superfluous words, suggesting both the white man's condescension towards Umuofia and how white language and culture will come to overtake that of Umuofia. At the end of the novel, the district commissioner mentions the title of the book he plans to write about his experiences in Nigeria: The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger. The district commissioner's proposed title here is itself wordy and grandiose. It is superfluous as well. But what distinguishes it from the Umuofia language is that it is book-length and it will be written down. Yet our stories are passed on from one generation to the next generation by word of mouth. The ability to read and write in English begins to represent power. As the white men provide more financial incentives for learning their language, and more clan members choose to enroll in their schools, Achebe's decision to transcribe several words from Igbo language throughout the novel takes back some of this power. It was like he was reneging power from the hands of the European settler. However, by suggesting that there are African ideas that cannot be adequately described in English, Achebe also uses repetition and idioms to create a more African style while writing in English. To add to this, what colonial rule and education unwittingly gave Africans or Nigerian or Africans as a whole was a common language with which to communicate with one another. By writing in English, Achebe is telling a story that people across Nigeria can comprehend, and by shaping it to his purposes, Achebe is claiming what is originally imposed. I hope we are going to enjoy reading this book as much as I've done. I think I've read it over 100 times. Thank you very much.